Hello and welcome to Code Tutorials. In this video, we'll be exploring how you can shine a light on select blog posts and display them using exceptional design. The widget we'll be using in this video is the Blog List Premium, belonging to the Qi Addons for Elementor Premium plugin. This page we're on has some examples of what you can do with this widget. You can use it to easily display your chosen posts in a way that stands out. As you can see, the list can be shown full width or boxed, and you can choose the number of columns your list will have, as well as precisely how many posts will be shown, their display order, as well as which category they belong to, and more. And I'll be using this example here for this tutorial. I'll recreate it as we go through the widget's options so you'll get a thorough understanding of what to expect, how to set up the Blog List Premium, and what effect different options and combinations thereof can achieve. I'll show you how to add your own content and how to style it. We'll go over everything in detail, so by the end you should be ready to create a blog list of your own. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Head over to the back end, and in the Elementor sidebar, search for Blog List Premium. You don't need to finish typing, it appears quite quickly. Now simply drag it over to the page, and the widget automatically displays my blog posts. I don't have that many as this is just a demo site, but still they are all shown right away. To start my work, I'll begin with the Content tab and the options we find here. And the first of those options is the Enable Same Height items. It's set to no by default, but if we switch it to yes, then all blog posts in the list will get the same height as the highest item in the list. As you can see, this won't stretch them out forcefully. It will simply give them the same amount of room height-wise. Okay, I'll disable this again. Then we have the Image Proportions option. We can use it to pick the size of the featured image. You can see the available settings in this drop-down and pick whichever one suits your needs most. I'll just show you one so you know what to expect. For example, thumbnail. This is what I get: smaller images and the blog list adjusting to the newly changed item dimensions. Okay, I'll go back to using original. There we go. Next, we have the number of columns option. It's set to 3, so I have 1, 2, 3 columns on the page. You can replace that number with anything between 1 and 8. I'll use 4. Okay. After that, there's the Columns Responsive option. This option lets you decide how many columns will be shown on a range of different screen widths. You can leave it set to predefined as the widget, like all others in the Qi Addons collection, is coded to be responsive. However, I'm going to pick custom so I can decide how many columns will be shown for each particular range of widths. Now, we don't have an option for the largest screens, the ones that are 1920 by 11,000 pixels, because the number of columns that will be shown on them is determined by the number of columns option we adjusted earlier. So, the first screen size here is for laptops, and you'd use this drop-down to pick the number of columns you want to show. I'm going to set 4 since this is still a pretty wide screen size. And I'll choose the same number of columns for Mac screens too. Okay. Then for a range of widths that cover landscape orientation on tablets, I'll set 2. And I'll do the same for the portrait orientation on tablets. Okay. And I'll use 1 for the landscape on mobile phones, as well as the portrait orientation on mobile phones. There. Done. After that, we have the Space Between Items option. As its name suggests, it serves to adjust the space dividing the different blog posts in the list. This space here. You can adjust it using the slider. You can see how the space changes, or you can type in a value. However, I'll just clear the option as I want to keep the default setting, which is 30 pixels. Alright. Next, there's the Enable Pagination option. It's disabled by default, but I'll switch it on at the end of the video so we can go over the options you'll get for the pagination itself once it's been enabled. For now, let's look at the Enable Zigzag option. I'll switch it to yes so we can see. With it active, the columns are displayed asymmetrically, so they go up and down, or zigzag in a way. If you decide to use this option, you'll be able to adjust the zigzag amount, meaning you'll be able to move the even number columns further down to increase the asymmetrical look. You can see what that might look like here. Still, I want my blog list to be aligned evenly, so I'll disable this. And this wraps up the first section of the content options. The next one in line is for the pagination. But if I open it, it's empty. That's because I haven't enabled the pagination and I don't need options for adjusting something I don't even have. We'll go over this later once I've enabled the pagination. But for now, let's keep moving. The next section of the options concerns the layout. And we have several options here we can examine. But before we do that, let's take a look at the queries section. This section will help me neaten up the look of my blog list before we dive into the other options. So first, we have the posts per page option. It's set to 9 by default, meaning if you have a blog list with a lot of posts in it, then posts from 10 and upward will be shown on subsequent pages, and visitors will be able to go to those pages using the pagination. However, I don't have that many posts, nor do I want to show that many, so I'm going to set 3 here. Don't worry about the look. If you recall, I set my list to have 4 columns. This is all part of the plan. I'm going to make the third post stretch across the last 2 columns later on. For now, let's get back to these options. The next one we have is order by. With it, we can pick what criterion will be used for ordering the posts in the list. By default, it's set to date, but you can replace that with any of these options such as post ID or title. For myself, I'll leave it set to date so only the latest posts are shown in the list. And then we can pick the order in which those posts will be displayed. You can choose between the default descending or switch it to ascending. I'll keep mine as is. And below this we have the additional parameters option. It allows us to filter, in a way, which posts will be shown in the blog list. With the additional parameters, we can choose whether we'll only show posts with certain IDs, certain taxonomy slugs, or from certain authors. Although I have the posts I want already displayed, I'll pick taxonomy slugs so I can show you the principle behind the additional parameters option. Now I can pick which taxonomy I want to use, a category or a post tag. I'll keep it set to category. Then, in the field underneath, I can type in the category slug, which will ensure that only the specific category I want will be shown. So I'll type in lifestyle here, which is incidentally the category of the posts we already see on the page. Without this, a newer post from another category might end up showing in the list. Okay, finally we have the taxonomy IDs option. It lets us set which particular posts we want in our list by adding their IDs here. Please note, the posts you choose need to belong to the category you already set or they won't be shown. All in all, the options in the query section help us control what is shown in the blog list. And now that I've determined the content of my list, I can get back to sorting out its layout. So let's open that section now. The first option here lets us pick the HTML tag for the post title. You can choose any of these in the drop-down. I'll set H3 for my titles. Under this, we have 2 quite interesting options. The first is boxed items indexes. It serves to place any post you want in a box. This is what I want to use for my third post. It's also the reason I deliberately left it without a featured image. I'm going to take advantage of this option to visually break up the look of the posts in my blog list. And it's very simple to use. You just type in the order number of the post or posts you want to box up. You have this note here with instructions just in case. So I want my third post to be boxed, so I'll enter 3 here. And there it is. This is the default look, a black background with white text, which I'll be styling later. Now, if you want to apply the box look to multiple posts, simply add which number they are in the list, count it from left to right, and make sure to divide all the numbers you enter with commas. The second interesting option here is the double width items indexes. Using it, we can make select posts double their original width, so they'd occupy 2 columns instead of 1. It's the same principle as the option above. Just enter the order number for the post or posts whose width you want to double. I'll enter 3 again since I only want to stretch out my third post. So this is the look I get. And it's with this in mind that I set my list to have 4 columns while showing only 3 posts. Alright, let's see what other options we have here. there's Show Info Icons. It's disabled by default, but if I switch it to Yes, it will display icons next to the post information. So we get these different icons next to the post's publish date, category, and author. I don't need this for my design, so I'll set the option to No and disable the info icons. Next, there's the Show Date option. It's enabled already, so we can see the post's published date on the page. But if I switch it to No, then the date disappears from the post information. I plan on keeping this, so I'll set the option back to Yes. There it is again. After that, we have the Show Category option. It's enabled by default, and if we look at the page, we can clearly see the category. However, if you prefer, you can switch it off, and then it will simply disappear from you, like so. I'll restore mine as I want to keep it. Okay. The last option here is Show Author. Just like with the date and category, we can stop this piece of information from showing in the list. So if we switch this to No, this is what the posts would look like. I'm going to leave them disabled for my planned design. Alright. After this, we have a new section of the options, Developer Tools. When we open them, there's just one option here. Switching its setting to Yes will get it to display the widget in the form of a standard WordPress shortcode, this light gray text, which we can easily copy for use elsewhere on our site. Okay. And next to the Developer Tools, we have the Help section. It contains various helpful resources, including a link to our Help Center, where you can find additional information and answers to frequently asked questions. And that's all for the Content tab. Let's move on to the next one, Style. The first section here is dedicated to the pagination style. It's empty now because my pagination is disabled, but I'll enable it at the end so we can go through all the options for customizing and styling it. And the same goes for the next section, Pagination Load More Style. We'll cover that too later. For now, let's move on to the Style section. The first option here is for setting the content alignment. By default, it's in the center, but we can move it to the left. Then all the text content will shift to the left. Or we can set it to be on the right, which would look like this. For my design, I'll go back to using the center alignment. Next, we have the title color option. You can use the color picker here to set any color you like easily, and the change will be visible on all posts in the list. Okay, after that, there's the title hover color, which works the same way, only the color becomes visible when we hover over a post. Okay. And under that, we have the title typography. It's a collection of varied typography options. The first one lets us change the font family. You can scroll through the list to see the available fonts or search for the one you want, like I'm going to do. Give me a second. Okay, this is the one. There, much better. Next, we have the size option, if we want to change the font size. I'm going to make my titles larger by setting 36 pixels here. Perfect. After that, there's the weight option, if we want to make the title lighter or bolder. We have all these options in the drop-down. I'll use 400 or normal for my font weight. Then there's the transform option, for changing the titles to uppercase, lowercase, making them capitalized, or keeping them normal, which is the same as default. After that, we have the style option, if we want to switch the title text to italic or oblique. Next, there's the decoration option, in case we want to add a line under, over, or through the title text. We also have the line height option, which I plan to change for my design. However, I don't want to use ems as my unit of measure, so I'll click here and pick pixels instead. And then I'll enter 43 to reduce the line height somewhat. After that, we have two more options, letter spacing and word spacing, in case we want to make any changes to the individual letters or words in our titles. And that's everything we get under typography. I'll close it now. This brings us to the last option in this section, which is the title hover underline. It's set to no by default, but if we switch it to yes, it creates an underline that becomes visible once we hover over a title in the list. I don't need this for my design, so I'll switch it back to no. Okay, let's check out the next section, Info Style. The options here will help us style this text. In my case, it's the information on the post's date and category. So the first thing we can do for them is change their color. You can drag the slider here to find the color you want, and the change will be immediately visible on the page. However, the exceptions to this are any posts you set with the boxed layout. You can see nothing has changed in my third post, which is boxed. There are separate settings for this layout, and we'll get to them as we go through the options. For now, in Info Style, the next thing we have is the Info Hover Color option. It works the same as the Info Color option, but any change we make will show only over the bit of info text that we're hovering over. Okay, last but not least, we have the Info Typography option. When we open it, we can see it contains the same collection of options we've already covered under Title Typography, so there's no need to go over it in detail again. I'll simply make the changes I need for my blog list design and we'll move on. Those changes are font size 16 pixels, then font weight 500 medium, and that's it. Everything else can stay as is. We can now check out the image style section. Here we have the image hover option. We can use it to set an effect that would affect the image when we hover over it. Currently, it's set to zoom in, so the images seem to draw closer as we hover, and that zoom in effect is symmetrical or centered. We can replace this with one of the other hover effects from this drop-down. I plan to use zoom out, so I'll show it to you last. But there's also the move effect, which makes the image shift sideways, and there's none if we want to disable any hover effects for the image. We can see that nothing happens now. Okay, and the effect I want on my list. Zoom out. This is what it looks like. If you opt for one of the two zoom image hover effects, then you can also pick the zoom origin in the next option. By default, it's set to center. You can change that and select top. It looks like this. Or bottom, so you get this look. Then left, which gets us this. And finally right, which looks like this. I'll go back to using the center. So this is what my images look like on hover. After this, we have the overlay color option. With it, you can set a color that would cover the image. If you do this, it's important to also set a degree of transparency, like so. And that will keep the images visible while providing them with a tint of color from the overlay. Alongside this, we have the overlay hover color. It works the same, but if you set the color and hover, you'll get this block covering your image. But if you add some transparency, you have this tinted effect. Alright, that's all for image style. Our next section is for adjusting the layout spacing style. The first option here is the image margin bottom. It lets us adjust the space dividing the image from the text content, so we can change the amount of space here. You can do this using the slider or by typing in a value. I'll do the latter and put 15 pixels for my image margin bottom. Okay. Then we have the title margin bottom option for adjusting the space under the title. We can see it here. It's the gap separating the title from the info text. I'm going to set another 15 pixels here. After that, we have the regular content padding option. When I start to increase it, you can see how the space around each post's text content changes. So it treats all your text content as one unit. And if I keep increasing, the added space will push the text to the middle and change how the lines break. I'll erase this so we can see one more thing about the padding, and that's this button at the end. If you click on it, it disconnects the fields, which allows you to adjust each side of the padding individually. So if I set 40 pixels for the top padding, only the space above the title will change. Okay, under that we have the box title margin bottom option. And this is a lot like the title margin bottom option we've just seen, only this one applies to posts with a box layout. So when I change it, only my third post shows added space under the title text. I'm going to set 24 pixels for this. And after that, there's the boxed item padding. This option allows us to set the amount of padding for posts with the boxed layout. You can see how the space changes when I increase. And my increase is the same on all sides. And just like before, if I keep increasing, then the placement of the text breaks will change. For this one, I'll adjust each side separately. So click on the button at the end, and then I'll enter 89 pixels at the top, 80 for the right, 126 for the bottom, and 80 on the left. And this is what my third post looks like now. Also, we've covered everything in the layout spacing style section, so we can open the box style section. The options here will help us adjust the look of the posts with the boxed layout. I have just the one, but if you have more, it will work on them all simultaneously. And the first option here lets us change the boxed background color. The default black color of the box can be replaced with any other color you like. And you can do that using the slider or by typing in the hex code for a specific shade you want. I want an ultramarine sort of blue for this, so I'll set the code for it. There we go. Following that, we have an option for replacing the color of the title text, and that's the initial color. When we hover, it still shows the default shade. For this, I want to set plain white, and the code for that is 6Fs. Okay. Next, we can change the color of the title on hover. If I change it, and then move my mouse over the title, we can see the new color. I'll also set white for this, so there will be no change between the initial and the look on hover. After that, there's the info color option. We can use it to change the color of the info text. And again, this is a change that will be visible on the initial display, but when you hover, it changes to reflect the info hover color. I'm going to change both of those to plain white, so all the text within the box will match. Done. And for info hover color, you can set whatever you like, and then the change will only be seen on hover. I'm just showing you this as an example. I plan to use the same white I have for the regular info color, which won't make for a noticeable change. See? Now when I hover, all the text stays white. And that is the design I wanted for my blog list premium, which means my element is done and I can click on update to save my work. However, we are not finished quite yet. I promised to show you the pagination and the options for styling it, so we'll do that now. And the first step is to turn on the pagination. So, Content tab, section with the general options, enable pagination, yes. And now we've gotten the pagination within the element. I have 2 page numbers and a navigation arrow. So with this here, I can now open the pagination section of the options. And we can see that a new option has appeared here. It will help us set how we want our pagination to look. Currently, it looks like standard WordPress pagination, and I plan to keep it that way while I cover the options for styling it. We'll look at the other settings too later. But for now, I just want to briefly mention the no pagination setting. If selected, it would remove the pagination from you as if we disabled it. Okay. With the standard WordPress setting, my pagination looks like this before I make any style changes. And to see what changes we can make, let's open the Style tab. Here we can see that the first section that was empty before, Pagination Style, has a whole bunch of options. The first one represents a collection of settings for adjusting the pagination typography. Given that we're dealing with numbers, the options here won't be as effective as they would be with text. But we can still change things like the font family, size, weight, and so on. The options we have here are the same as those we saw for title typography, so I don't think there's any need to go over them again. After this, we have 2 switches that reveal different settings for the pagination, those for normal and for hover display. Under normal, we can set the pagination color, and any change you make will be immediately visible on the page. Besides that, we also have the background color option. We can use it to set a background for the pagination elements, meaning the numbers and the arrow icons. Granted, it doesn't look all that great to start with, but I'll keep this set for now so I can show you a few other options related to it later. For now, let's switch to the settings for the hover display, where we have another color option. This one, let me show you. Okay, I need something more contrasting. There. The color you set here will only be visible on the number marking the blog list page that you're currently on, or a pagination element that you're hovering over, whether it's a number or an icon. And the same principle applies to the background color. Anything you set? Okay, I need something more distinct. Something darker will do. And now the new color can be seen as the background to the active pagination number or one that's being hovered over. Alright, those are the options under the switches. Below them we have two fields for picking the icons for the pagination arrows. The first field is for the arrow that's on the left for previous pages, and the second is for the right side or the pages that come next. We can see the latter within the element. Here it is. You can replace this default icon with something from the icon library or with an SVG. Okay, and to go with this, there is the option to adjust the pagination arrow size. You can use the slider and the arrow will grow as you move it. You can see it's bigger now. Or you can use the input field to type in a new value. I'll simply erase it to restore the default value. After this, we have the pagination item border radius option. We can use it to soften the edges of the pagination background, or more precisely, the space that holds it. Let me show you. If I increase, then the rectangular shape of the background becomes more oval as the corners get curved. And this is clear to see thanks to the background color that reflects the changes made to the pagination space. To make the options effects more apparent, I'm going to increase the pagination item width. Give me a second. As you can see, the background color shows how the space stretches, and if pushed far enough and combined with the radius, we can get circular backgrounds for the pagination items. And you can also increase the pagination item height to even out the background for all the items. See? Now the space holding the numbers and the arrow is the same. Given that I have a set width and height, they can't be overridden by the radius. What do I mean by this? If I go back and keep increasing the radius, there won't be any visible change. All the corners have been smoothed down already. The radius can't cut into the height and width, so increasing it makes sense only up to a point. And you don't have to make your pagination item backgrounds entirely rounded. You can, for example, set a smaller value, say 10 pixels. Then we'd have blunted corners but a recognizably rectangular shape for the background. Okay, next we have the option for setting the space between pagination items. It's very straightforward. By increasing the value here, you increase the space between the pagination items. And there's the pagination margin top, which helps us increase the space between the pagination and the rest of the blog list. And that's it for the pagination style options. The next section concerns the load more type of pagination, so I need to switch to it now, meaning let's go back to the Content tab. Then in the pagination section, I'm going to replace the standard WordPress type with load more. Just FYI, if you switch to plain standard, the style settings you made will carry over, so you won't lose your work if you change your mind. Okay, we are here for the load more setting. And when it's selected, it creates a button that will load additional posts within the same list, provided they fit the conditions we set in the query section. And we can style this button using the options in the pagination load more style section. Let's see what those are. At first glance, the options are pretty straightforward. In fact, these are the same options you'd get when styling any of the buttons in the Qi Addons collection. To start with, there's the typography bundle, but you should know by now what it contains. Then there is another set of switches for normal and hover settings. Under normal, we have options such as the text color, so only the text within the button will change. Then we can change the color of the button itself using the background color option, or we can set a border for the button. Just pick a border color, then set a width, and voila! Besides those, we have a few other options, such as the border radius if we want to curve the button's corners, or the padding, which will adjust the space around the button text and indirectly change the button size. And if we take a peek at the hover settings, we have pretty much the same options as those we saw under normal. And those are, broadly, some of the things you can change with the load more pagination type. Besides load more, we have one more pagination type left, and that is infinite. I'm going to set it so we can take a brief look. With this one, scrolling down the page will add more posts to the blog list display. And the same thing I mentioned for load more applies. The list will show more posts, but only if they fit the criteria set in the query section. It's not going to show every possible post on your site. And that's pretty much it. We looked at the different pagination types and the options for styling the pagination. As I don't want to use the pagination, I'll go back to the general options and disable it again. Alright, this is the finished look that I wanted for my blog list, so I'll hit update to save it. Okay, there we are. Before we sign off, I'd like us to go through the page we started from one more time. You'll find different examples of how the blog list premium widget can be used. Here you can see other design solutions besides the one I made in this video. You can find inspiration or an idea that you'll use as a model for your own building work. You've seen what options there are and how they're used, and you now know that you can pick what your list will look like by setting the number of columns and posts that will be shown, whether they'll have featured images or be boxed, which specific parameters you want to use to limit the posts that will be displayed in the list, whether you'll use pagination or not. There's so much you can do with this widget that you'll be spoiled for choice. And hopefully this video has helped to get you on track to using the blog list premium widget. Still, if you have any questions after watching this tutorial, or if there are any comments or suggestions you'd like to make, please drop us a line in the comments section below. Also, make sure to subscribe to our channel and be the first to learn about any new tutorials and theme guides. Thank you for watching.